Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In case you're new here, my name is Laura and I'm a PhD student of comparative literature in Germany, and on this channel I discuss mainly classics. Today I'm going on with my series on Gothic and Romantic literature, and today I've got a romantic story for you by Izumi Kyoka, a Japanese writer who wrote the story The Surgery Room, or in original title Gekashitsu, and it's published in a collection called Japanese Gothic Tales, which got me curious because I thought, are there really Gothic tales in Japan and how are they structured? So I just want to summarize the story to you and read some of the most important passages. They're just rather short, but they illustrate very well the style of Kyoka, and they will get you an impression of his writing and the story as a whole. So the story is really short. I think it's around 9 pages, but it's really worth a read. It was published in 1895. It is structured in 2 parts. In the first part, the narrator goes to a hospital where there's to be an operation held of an aristocratic woman, the Countess Kifune, and he asks whether he can attend the operation because he is a painter and he wants to see the scene for inspiration, and he gets allowed to attend the operation as a visitor or guest because he's also friends with the doctor, Dr. Takamine. And then we have the scene of the Countess lying there on the operating table, and I will just read to you how she is depicted. The surgery room itself was bathed in a luminescence so radiant that I could count the particles of dust in the air. It stood somehow apart, stark and inviolate. And there in the center of the room lay the Countess Kifune, focus of concern for both those outside the room and those inside, who were closely observing her. Wrapped in a spotless white hospital gown, she lay on the operating table as if a corpse, face drained of color, nose pointing upwards, chain narrow and frail, and her arms and legs seeming too fragile to bear even the weight of fine silk. Her teeth were slightly visible between pale lips. Her eyes were tightly closed and her eyebrows drawn with worry. Loosely bound, her hair fell lightly across her pillow and spilled down on the operating table. Probably you have noticed the use of imagery here and use of colors, especially the color white. I think, like, as she's looking like a corpse with her pale lips and pale face, just lying there and waiting for something to happen to her. That's a very strong image, I think. And before she can be operated, she is asked to take an anesthetic because this way she won't have so much pain, but she refuses, and they try to convince her that she has to take the anesthetic, but she still refuses because she says, "If you must persist, then I will have to tell you why. I have been keeping a secret in my heart, and now I'm afraid the medication will make me reveal it. If I can't be treated without an anesthetic, then I refuse to have the operation. Please leave me alone." So she's really desperate in a way. She definitely does not want to take that anesthetic. So she says, "Just operate on me without the anesthetic. I will be able to withstand the pain." And she seems to trust the Dr. Takamine in a way, because he asks her, "Are you really sure that I can do that I can lead the operation? And like, are you really willing to withstand that pain?" And she says, "Please go on, please operate on me now." And she says even, "All right, then go ahead. Even if I get better, I'm going to die eventually. Operate on me just like this." So that's actually what they do, and Dr. Takamine seems a little cold and very concentrated and just wants to start. And then he just takes the scalpel and puts it into her breast after he had opened her shirt. We don't really know actually what kind of an operation is going to happen. We just know that they have to cut through the bone actually and like shave the bone. I don't know what that actually means because it is not said explicitly. But then you've got another very powerful picture. A red winter plum fallen to the snow, the smooth trickle of blood flowed down her chest and soaked into her white gown. The Countess' cheeks returned to their pallid hue, but her composure seemed complete. And then they actually do the operation, and Dr. Takamine proceeds with everything. And after a second, he asks her, "Are you in pain?" He asked. "No, because it is you," she says. The Countess slumped back. Her eyes stared upward and fixed themselves upon the famous surgeon's face in one last ghastly, cold gaze. "But you couldn't have known." At this instant, she grabbed the scalpel from Takamine's hand and plunged it into her body, just below her breast. Takamine, his face ashen, stammered, "I haven't forgotten." His voice, his breath, his handsome figure. A smile of innocent joy came to the Countess's face. She released Takamine's hand and fell back in her pillow as the color faded from her lips. At that moment, the two of them were absolutely alone, oblivious to earth and heaven and the existence of another soul. So you've got this scene. You wouldn't really expect her actually to take the scalpel and kill herself, I think. And you only get a glimpse of the fact that there must have been a relationship between Takamine and her, because she says, it's you, and you must have forgotten, but he hasn't forgotten, so they must have had some kind of connection before they met there again in the hospital. And then there's part 2 of the story, 9 years earlier, when Dr. Takamine goes together with the narrator to a park where the azaleas are in full bloom and everything's beautiful, and they meet a few women. Among them is also the Countess Kifune, and they talk about their beauty and just a little more conversation. And in the very last few sentences, the narrator reflects on Takamine's behavior, and he says, "For the next 9 years, until the incident at the hospital, Takamine never said a word about her, not even to me. Given his age and position in society, he could have married well. Yet he never did. If anything, he became even more strict in matters of personal conduct than he had been in his student days. But I have already said enough. Although their graves are in different places, one in the hills of Aoyama, one downtown in Yanaka, the Countess and Dr. Takamine died together, one after the other, on the same day." And then there's one last sentence. I think that's really important for the whole message of the story. Because Izumi Kyoka writes, "Religious thinkers of the world, I pose this question to you. Should these two lovers be found guilty and denied entrance into heaven?" And I think I just want to give a little bit of context to you, because the story is not really so easy to understand if you read it yourself. At the first time I was reading it, I was a little overwhelmed because I couldn't really make sense of it so much, because I didn't really understand what was really going on. I mean, of course, you realize that she's killing herself, but you don't really know what's behind it, and just that probably they were falling in love, but they couldn't be together because of societal restrictions in a way. But you don't even have the scene where Dr. Takamine kills himself again. So I think it's important to know a little bit more about the story. So actually there's a Japanese subgenre that is called Shinju, and it's made of 2 characters. I can blend them in here. Shin is also in the Kun reading, it's the kokoro, it's the heart. And Ju is the middle or the center. So it's the middle, the middle of the heart, the center of the heart. I think it's just shows also the unity of the emotions in a way. So the idea behind this is just really a double suicide because of love, out of love. So the idea that 2 lovers kill themselves together, and they're really connected through this death, and also because they want to die together, and there's of course many different reasons, but I think this is actually a very good example, this story, because especially in the Japanese puppet theater, kabuki it's called, it's a very famous motive, I think, the Shinju. I haven't seen kabuki myself yet, and that's more famous place than the story that I'm telling you about at the moment, but it's worth checking out. I think it's a very powerful motive actually. And there's an afterword in the book I've got here, and the discussion of the tales by the editor, and the editor is actually Charles Shiro Inoue. He is an assistant professor of Japanese at the Tufts University, or at least he was when he published the book, I think in 1996. And he wrote his dissertation on Izumi Kyoka as well. And he just discussed a little bit about the stories. And there's one part I want to read to you because I think it's rather insightful. He says, "The most distinguishing feature of the surgery room was not style, though, but its sense of social justice. As for the matter of Victor Hugo's influence, Kyoka's perspective was so spiritually new that the critic and theorist Shimamura Hogetsu had to coin a term to name to achievement. Like the equally brief Night Patrol, which immediately preceded it, the surgery room was labeled a conceptual novel, or kannen shosetsu in Japanese, a fictional work written to express an explicit social message or concept. These works were considered new because Kyoka chose to indict the social context of aberrant behavior rather than simply to condemn the criminal. Following Hugo's example, he saw the goodness of bad people, in this case the adulterously minded Dr. Takamine and the Countess Kifune, who were at the same time people of beauty and pure feeling. The author suggests that in another social context, they could not have been forced to destroy themselves. By locating their desire within the inherently evil setting of marriage as usual, Kyoka boldly chose to point a critical finger at Meiji society at large." So actually what Inoue says is that Kyoka criticizes the societal norms and the expectations that you marry well or you marry amongst your own rank, I think, which obviously was not possible for the Countess and the Doctor, which is why they couldn't live out their love, and which is why they had to end their lives together. And there must have been this belief, I think also I read, but in the Edo period, before the Meiji period started in, I think, 1888, and before, in the Edo period, people believed that when lovers died, they met again in heaven and they continued their love in heaven. So the question in the end, this religious thinkers of the world, I posed this question to you: should these two lovers be found guilty and denied entrance into heaven? So that's a very interesting question, I think, because also, there's the belief sometimes that when people kill themselves, they are denied the way into heaven. And here we have this double suicide, and the question, what will happen to the people after their death? Because it's suicide, is it a crime? Or is it the only way out of this whole situation, And how can people deal with this contradiction in a way? And I think just the story is really great in opening these questions up and making us reflect on them, I think. The whole collection here is really great. It's 4 stories, Japanese Gothic Tales. Actually, I wouldn't really call them Gothic because I think maybe there's Gothic elements. There's eerie elements as well. There's the surgery room and also the usage of the colors, the white and red. It's very powerful and very well executed in the story, I think. But also, of course, you've got this love, this lost love and romance. It's definitely a romantic story. You can read that throughout, but I'm not sure whether I would say it's like a Gothic story actually. If you've read it or if you want to read it and want to leave your thoughts down in the comments, I'd be glad to read them. Actually, I really enjoyed the story and I want to read more by Izumi Kyoka as well. I think there's quite a few stories he wrote. I even tried reading it in Japanese. Actually, I have to say it's really difficult. There's very long sentences and descriptions, but I think the feeling that you get when you're reading it, I think actually the translation is really good because it makes the text appear the way that the Japanese text also appeared to me. So like the atmosphere is transported pretty well, I think. So I hope you enjoyed this short introduction to Izumi Kyoka and the Surgery Room, or Gekashitsu, from 1895. Leave your thoughts below and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. I'd appreciate that a lot. And see you in my next video. There will be a lot more videos on Japanese novels and stories in the future because I'm just totally in for that at the moment. So you can expect more about Natsume Soseki and Banana Yoshimoto, for example, also Ueda Akinari, and just stay tuned for everything that's going to come. Bye bye.